At first, it was surreal. It was a little bit overwhelming. I mean, I remember I had hired the general manager, had hired the kitchen managers, the front of house managers. We go to training, we come back. I'm at the construction site. I would say the 120 days, I was there 115, except for the
Wow.
5 days. So I was visiting my managers while they were in MIT training. And it was the night before opening. I remember sleeping on a booth because we were still tinkering with the audio system. Um,
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast. This is the podcast where you hear the real stories of people just like you who have become extraordinary leaders. You will learn valuable tips from their lives, tips that you can apply to become the best leader that you were created to be. When leaders are intentional, lives are changed. I'm your host, Sean Olson. I'm a business owner, author, keynote speaker, and obviously podcast host. So thank you for tuning into this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast. For all of you listening today, if you could do me a huge favor as we get going, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave comments, make all the algorithms of the world happy so our show can expand. We greatly appreciate it. Well, listeners, you're in for a treat today. I would like to welcome my guest. His name is Nimesh Patel. Nimesh is the Vice President of Operations and Culinary with Boston's Pizza Restaurant and Sports Bar. Nimesh and I had the opportunity to meet a few years back, and I'll talk about that in a second. Nimesh, welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast.
Thanks, Sean. Happy to be here today.
Yeah, great to see you again. So, for all you listening, Nimesh and I met about 2.5 years ago down in Texas, which is where he is located. He was a part of the leadership program that I was coaching inside of, and we met. And I was just really invigorated with Nimesh and his leadership skills and abilities, and really the story of Boston's Pizza. So, Nimesh, I'm looking forward to kind of walking through that today. As you know, with every episode, we begin with kind of an opening question. Walk us through your professional career, leadership lessons learned along the way. I know you've had a great restaurant and franchise career, so fill us in.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to go way back for my leadership, and kind of what started it is I grew up in a family business. So at a very young age, we learned to be leaders just by following our parents. They were leading a business and employees, and it was learning what to do, what not to do, how you keep people engaged. Started there.
What was the
Um,
family biz?
so we had a small mom and pop hotel, 25 units in Savannah, Georgia. So we bought it back in 1986, and I learned very quickly what it takes to be a business owner.
Yeah, so mom and pop hotel, which means you did everything.
I remember getting off the school bus many days, and mom was still making motel rooms, so we had to go jump, throw our backpack in we lived on the property, so we had to throw our backpack inside the house and then run outside and help mom because the maid didn't show up today or something else happened, and we filled up the night before, weren't expecting to fill up all 25 rooms, and we had to clean them and get them ready to resell for the next day.
Wow. So I know this is an impossible question, but when you think back to that time, what is a leadership lesson you gained during that time with the hotel that you still carry out today?
It's about rolling up your sleeves. Sometimes you have to clean the bathrooms. Sometimes you have to pick up the trash in the parking lot. I remember spring breaks weren't spring breaks necessarily for us because that's when my dad also worked a 9 to 5 job to help out at the motel because when we bought it in the 80s, a recession was going on
Mm-hmm.
and he needed help to pay the mortgage on the business he just bought. So he went back to work in the hospital as a lab technician. And I remember he would schedule his vacation days around our spring break thinking we're going to out of town. Maybe we're going to New York or we're going to Mexico. Nope, we were digging ditches and running plumbing that needed to be reran for the drainage system or something like that. As a kid, you don't value that. But when you flip around and you have kids now, you're like, man, I wish we still had a small motel so I can teach my kids those fundamental things we
Yeah,
learned the hard way.
that's
So
awesome. That's awesome. And obviously, you're in a great area there in Savannah, Georgia. My wife and I are fans of Tybee, so we have been through there a number of times. That's kind of funny. I remember I'm similar to you in that we actually owned a restaurant. We owned a family restaurant back in '81. We bought it, and so I'm 11 years old, and we owned it for a number of years. And I remember doing everything. right? And learning everything. And yeah, I didn't like the dish duty too much. So I was trying to get into everything else, but great lessons learned. That's awesome, man. So
Yep.
take us on to your journey then. I know you kind of transitioned into the restaurant world soon.
I did. One of the downsides of working in a family business was you didn't necessarily get a paycheck. So when I
Hmm.
turned 13 and a half, I was able to get a work permit from school and got a paying job, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
So I worked at a place called Flying Frogs. It had a little pizza and express inside. So I started off as a dishwasher, and shocking even to me at the time, within 30 days I became head supervisor, and I was now managing people sometimes twice my age at the age of 13 and 14. So I learned very quickly, and I think it came naturally to a point to where I wasn't afraid of doing any task. And I think that was the
Hmm.
important piece for me. There was nothing beneath me. So willing to do it, willing to show people if I was able to do it. So in that training aspect, the leadership component just came natural. And where others didn't want to take the extra duties, I would take it on because to me it was a
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So you're in there, you're young teenager and stuff like that, but obviously you took lessons you learned from the family hotel. I love that idea of modeling the way, setting the example, and those different things. But at that young age, because some of our listeners are in their teens and 20s, how did you, other than modeling the way, were you intentional at all in your leadership and like trying to bring people along? When did you begin to realize I can lead, not just do?
Yeah, I think it was not necessarily right away. I think I was just in the moment at that age. I don't think I was mature enough to realize what I was
Yeah.
doing. So it was more of learning to put aces in their places, learning
Mm.
what they were great at, and moving the components in the chessboard to make it work for what we needed to accomplish that day. And working in a place like Flying Frogs, so think of a Discovery Zone or a Chuck E. Cheese, right?
Yeah.
So we could have 300 people in there at 11 a.m. on a Saturday for birthday parties. How do you coordinate all those pieces? You have 150 there for private events, and then you have the normal general public coming in additional on top. Who do you put in the pizza making? Who do you put at the cash register? Who do you put in dishes? Who's making prep? Who's running the gaming? Who's running the private party hosting? And just being able to read people, I think, helped. And
Yeah.
that was probably where my intentional leadership came from, is like knowing somebody disliked something, they weren't going to do great at it,
Yep.
finding what motivated them, and then saying, hey, they really love this position. Though they're not great at it, I can teach them how to be great at the item. But knowing they enjoyed gaming, so they enjoyed the games,
Yeah.
how they function, learning the mechanics behind it, how to fix it. So I was able to work with them to get them to where they needed to be. And then while others were great at hiding, they didn't want to be people facing,
Right.
versus the ones that were bubbly and excited, get the kids cheering for their birthday party, putting them in the right place. And I think that's where I thrived at, was just finding where people were great at and moving them into those pieces.
That's awesome. No, I love that. Great principles in there, listeners, about really knowing your people and knowing what motivates them. And I loved your phrase that this may be something that lit them up, even though they didn't have the skills yet. And we can always teach skills. We can't teach heart, passion, and motivation.
100%.
Yeah. So, question about that, because you were young still at that point. Did you have people you were watching in that realm? Was it something that came to you naturally because of your parents? How'd that come into play for you?
I think naturally from my parents, but additionally the owner Jay, watching how he did it, how he motivated. He was very passionate about his business. This was a heart project for him.
Mm.
So this is something new that he developed and created, and he really loved doing it. You saw the excitement when he walked in on a Saturday and is like, "Hey, we have 32 parties scheduled today," and there wasn't a stress about it, right? There was an excitement about it.
Yeah,
Sometimes you walk in and your leader is, "Oh my God, we got this going on, that going on," and
exactly.
frantic, and he was calm, cool, no
Hmm.
issue. So that I think gave me grounding. That hey, we're gonna get through it. At the end of the
Yeah,
day, it's a fun place for kids to enjoy. It wasn't serious. It wasn't brain surgery, right? So
yeah,
I think that. So I think that gave me a lot of insight into kind of how to treat the situation, how to assess it, and how to react.
awesome. So, what came after that?
So after that, I think my senior year, I switched over to Papa John's. I've been in pizza for quite a while now.
Yeah.
So I went to Papa John's. It just worked better with my school schedule. I had a full load and I was going off to college. So it helped me transition to Papa John's later on in Atlanta as well. So I worked there. It was my senior year, I kind of was just a cook at Papa John's. But then when I switched to Atlanta, I became a supervisor in Atlanta at a Papa John's throughout college. So I worked there for another 3 or 4 years. From there, I finished my bachelor's degree in hospitality administration and
Mhm.
finance. And then from there, I went to learn Spanish. I
Hmm.
knew I wanted to be in the restaurant industry. I felt like that was something I was missing. So I went to go study Spanish for 9 weeks in Mexico. And then I transitioned to the CIA Greystone in Napa Valley. So I had the unfortunate life of waking up next to grapes, drinking great wine, and enjoying great food for about
Wow.
a year and a half. So
Yep.
it was one thing in my life that I feel like as a young person, I didn't savor what I was doing as much
Yep.
as I would today. But I wanted the culinary background so that way in restaurants I could be dangerous enough, not necessarily cook every day, but I'd be dangerous enough to understand how our kitchens, our heart of houses focus and how they function.
Yeah, I like that though, because you're giving yourself a well-rounded education, right? You've been in a couple different types of restaurants, different locations geographically, because things are done differently. And yeah, I spent a couple years in Napa Valley when I was a kid too, so I know that area. And like you, I did not cherish it. And I think it's an important piece is as we go through our life and we go through our career in different stops, there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to do, but we also have to just experience it. Like take time to take a breath and say, look at where I am. You know, I think about you. You were in Savannah, which is a great tourist destination. You spent time in Napa Valley, a great tourist destination. And I'm not saying this about you, but sometimes we get so caught up, we never even cherish where we are.
Interesting story. Growing up in Savannah, I never did the tourist things until I was married, and we intentionally did a weekend trip in Savannah where we booked a hotel, didn't stay at my parents' house, booked a hotel, booked a bunch of tourist tours, ate at restaurants I'd never eaten at,
Mhm.
but are on the national accolades.
Yeah,
So it was intentionally for us to do that, and it was an eye opener. Let's just put it that way for
it
me.
is, no doubt. So you get out of college, you go that route, then what comes?
So I was wanted to work as a line cook or try to do something in culinary for a year. I didn't last that long. I was doing well, but $9 an hour didn't pay the bills.
Hmm.
So I started applying for some jobs, and at the time, Olive Garden was king in casual dining. I knew I
Yeah.
wanted to be in casual dining somehow, so I applied. I got an interview, got hired. I was 23 years old. I remember HR calling me twice to verify my birth date, just because at the time Olive Garden required 5 years of casual dining experience. They wanted to make sure you
Wow.
were senior. But I got hired on the spot in my interview, and there I was, 23, going through MIT management and training, and I was successful. I became within a year. I was on the track for GM in training.
Hmm.
Um, and then at some point, I think I was living at home at my parents', and my dad goes, "Hey, if you're going to work 70, 90 hours a week, why don't we build a restaurant?" So,
Wow.
yeah. So,
There you
so,
go.
so
So
from,
yeah, I want to press pause on that for 1 second. I know Olive Garden's owned by Darden. Darden's a massive franchise with different store brands inside of it, not just Olive Garden. And you talked about that management and training. Was that something that Darden did? Like you went off site, I think they're based in Orlando area, or was that with your local store? How'd that play?
It's a little bit of a hybrid. Back then it was a 13-week training program. So you're in restaurant for it varied anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks in a row, and then you do a 1 week leadership training in Orlando at their headquarters. So that one's very structured. So they bring in kitchen managers, front of house managers, different position managers, and general managers into this training program for a week, where you're learning skills about intentional leadership, about
Yep.
leadership styles, how to effectively manage your team. And that was very valuable to me, especially at that young age still, where it was
Yeah.
molding me. Um, because you're not only learning from your leaders that are putting on these classes, but you're also learning from the others in your cohort.
Exactly.
Um, So, and we were all from different walks of life. And, for me at that age, it was really just like everybody's looking at me. Why are they looking at me weird? Because I'm in a group of people in their 40s, some in their
Hmm.
50s, very few in their 30s. And I was by far the only one in the 20s.
Wow.
So it was eye opening for me. I just, age never was a factor for me because I'd been doing it since I was 13 with people. So I think when I got my store after finishing training, I was in Savannah again and the Olive Garden there. And I think one team member figured out what my age was.
Yeah.
And other than that, and this was like 3 or 4 months in, they realized I went to Savannah High. They realized I graduated in 1999. And here I am in 2005, 2006, managing the restaurant. And it was a issue for maybe 5 days, and then it went away. They're
That's
like,
good.
some of the people that were more resistant to my approach and our changes we were making, those were the ones that were giving me trouble. And it was just simply having a conversation with them. Like, hey,
Hmm.
let's talk. And I think that transparency, and it all comes down to respect as well, right?
It does. Yeah.
And if you respect your team members, they'll respect you back, and change is hard for a lot of people, and change requires action. And sometimes people don't want the extra duties or the extra actions that change requires.
Hmm.
But if you explain to them the why, I find people will come with you. If you push them to get there, they're not going to come, they're going to resist. But if you walk with them along that path, explain them where the vision's going, why this is going to make their life easier once we get through the few hurdles, I find it 99.9% people will come with you.
Absolutely, they will. And I love that lesson inside of that, though, Nimesh, is, we work today with multiple generations, right? And I know the younger generation oftentimes thinks, I'm being held back, or the older generation doesn't respect what I'm doing. But the principles of leadership that you expressed about being intentional, giving respect, because when we give respect, we receive respect, but having those tough conversations, getting to know people, stepping up. And my thought on this is when we are intentional and we do the right thing for the right reason and we treat people right, great things happen, because that's how we exhibit the respect. We can talk respect like, hey, Nimesh, I respect you. But you're not going to go by what I say. You're going to go by what I do and how I treat you. So when we intentionally do the right thing for the right reason in the right way, we love people and respect them, incredible things happen for us and them. Hi, everyone. I want to quickly interrupt this podcast to talk to you about something huge that is coming out in August from Renergize Professional Coaching. It is the Intentional Leader Network. We've talked about this coming. The Intentional Leader Network, you are going to get an online course on how to become the best leader you were created to be. You're going to have bi-weekly group coaching calls with everybody in the network where you'll be learning content, you'll be given tools, and we'll even have hot seat coaching. You will have the chance to bring your questions to the table, have me coach you in real time with the entire audience listening. And one of the greatest aspects of the Intentional Leader Network is developing a community of friends from all different sectors, all different levels of leadership, learning from one another and taking that learning to the next level. If you're ready to become the best leader you were created to be, look for the Intentional Leader Network at intentionalleadernetwork.com. Join the wait list today. It launches in August. We're looking forward to having you in the network. Thanks.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now your dad's like, hey, quit working 90 hours a week for Olive Garden. Let's do something on our own. What was that?
We started looking at different franchises. I didn't feel confident that I could do a from scratch restaurant on my own with all the
Yeah.
components I needed. So we wanted to look at somebody who was a leader in the industry but was great opportunity. So they would give us the systems, the recipes, kind of the know-how. I just had to go execute it. So we did discovery days at 3 or 4 different concepts, and shockingly, we were in Atlanta at a different pizza concept, and we were filling up gas on our way back to Savannah, and at the corner of my eye, I saw a place called Boston's Pizza. Never heard of it. So we filled up gas. We went in. The GM was there. He's like, "Hey, the owner's right next door at the motel. I'll tell him to come over and talk to you too." So here we are talking to the owner of the location and the GM, and looked at the menu. The menu looked so robust, very similar. There's pizza, pasta,
Yeah.
things I'm familiar with at the time. I'm still working at Olive Garden, and I was like, hey, this might work. It's got a sports bar, it's got a family dining room. I mean, I just saw potential, you
Yeah.
know. And so I went back, did some more research, learned Boston Pizza was out of Canada. They're the largest casual dining concept in Canada. So I was like, man, they've got it down in Canada. They're new in the US, and here's an opportunity that we've been looking for. So got home, filled out the questionnaire on their website, and somebody called me. And then about a year and a half later, we opened our Boston Pizza in Jacksonville, Florida.
That's incredible. So I want to hit one aspect of this really quick because people always say sometimes people get lucky, right? So you kind of fell into that, you got lucky, whatever the case is. But actually, what I heard in that was you're in Atlanta, you've gone to see these concepts. Maybe something resonated, maybe it didn't. But you saw this Boston's Pizza thing. I bet that there was a moment where you're sitting there going, what is that? What's going on here? Who's involved? But there's also that part of you where you're just like, hey, I'm not going to ask any questions, right? We talk ourselves out of taking steps instead of creating our own luck. So in that moment when you're with your dad, you're in that parking lot, you see Boston's Pizza, like, was it an immediate, I'm doing this, I got to go figure this out? Or was it kind of like, yeah, let's see what happens? What was that mentally for you?
It's interesting you say that. I've thought about it many times. I was like, I get back in the car. I actually start driving back towards the highway to get back on I-75.
Yeah.
And then I make a U-E and
Really?
go back. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I was like, it looked like just another restaurant sign, right? It said restaurant and sports bar, it said pizza on it, and I was like, okay, I'll look at it when I go back. But I'm like, no, I'm here. What am I doing? So I pop a U, we pull into the restaurant. So it was mentally at first, it was like interesting while I'm pumping gas, but then it was like, okay, I'll figure it out, And we had a great meeting with the concept we're looking at, and it's a concept that I was familiar with growing up, and I thought there was great potential. But then I turned around, and it was love at first sight, and I'm glad I did walk in
Hmm.
because and you're right, it was a had I not turned around, I would have led a different path to this day.
That's incredible. Okay, so you get your store, which is awesome, just a year and a half later, which is actually pretty rapid, right, for somebody jumping into that realm. But it's in Jacksonville. So was that like Boston's Pizza had demographic or geography they wanted to go to? Did you pick that?
A little. So they did have both Savannah was available and Jacksonville was available. So we had actually signed up for two locations, one in Savannah, one in Jacksonville. And at the time, the economy was booming in Jacksonville. Savannah was not what it is today back in 2007.
Mhm.
So we decided to open the first location in Jacksonville, and then the second would come shortly after. What we didn't realize was that our financial economy would collapse in that
Yeah.
time period as well. So there were some hard lessons learned through that process as well. But it was intentional to go to Jacksonville first, and then we were
Hmm.
going to open our second one in Savannah, which didn't happen. But at the same point, we I I'm a strong believer in lessons are learned if you're willing to look for them in everything that you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. So let me ask you a question. So you go to Jacksonville, you open up the store, and for the first time in your life, you are the man, right? Like it's on you. You've had incredible people that were in your path up to that point. You worked hard, you were a good leader. So I'm not minimizing that track record, but for the first time in Jacksonville, it's on your shoulders. What did that
100%.
feel like? How did you like navigate, not just navigate it, but like own it and thrive?
At first, it was surreal. It was a little bit overwhelming. I mean, I remember I had hired the general manager, had hired the kitchen managers, the front of house managers. We go to training, we come back. I'm at the construction site. I would say the 120 days, I was there 115, except for the
Wow.
5 days. So I was visiting my managers while they were in MIT training. And it was the night before opening. I remember sleeping on a booth because we were still tinkering with the audio system. So it was kind of surreal. I went home at 4 a.m., took a shower, was back at the restaurant at 6 a.m. And it was surreal because we had hired 180 something people, to open this restaurant. But it was the second the doors open, all that went out. People were walking in,
Yeah.
and it was like riding a bicycle, right?
Yep.
It was what I've been doing my whole life, what I've been working towards, whether it was education or the intentional experience I got where I got it, because it taught me the fundamentals of what I needed to do. Now,
Hmm.
there were some lessons I didn't learn through those processes, whether it was the legal aspect of owning your own
Hmm.
business or the HR side,
Yep.
because when you work for somebody like Darden, I mean, there's $6-8 billion company. They have people that take care of that for you, or the
Correct.
marketing piece and things like that. So there were more lessons learned on leadership throughout it that you don't necessarily think about when you're a position manager or a position leader or mid-level manager. Um,
Yeah, but you had your eyes and your ears open and you were willing to learn. And I know listeners, you've heard me say numerous times, leaders are learners. The learning never stops. It never stops. I was speaking to somebody the other day, Nimesh. She is somewhere in her early 70s. I don't know her exact age because you don't ask, right? But she's somewhere in her early 70s. And she's talking about all these things she's learned in the last 6 months and like what she's looking forward to learning next. And she is in preferment, she calls it, right? Not retirement, but doing what she prefers to do now, but still learning. So I appreciate that you kept your open eyes and ears with that. So at what point then did you go from franchise owner, store owner to corporate for Boston's Pizza? What was that transition?
Yeah, it was. We had, I think, roughly 2017. So fast forward 9 years from opening, and my dad said, "Hey, I think I'm ready to retire." The only debt we had was the restaurant at the time. So he's like, "Hey, I think we need to figure out an exit, or you need to find a different partner
Hmm.
to buy me out because I want to retire knowing I owe nobody anything."
Yeah.
So have a good retirement in that sense. So we started looking at exiting the business, and part of the problem was the real estate was worth so much
Hmm.
that it was hard to sell a restaurant to a restaurateur with that
Uh,
kind of investment. So it took a little while. So fast forward 2 years, we exited the business. And to be honest, I didn't have any plans. I was like, all right,
mhm.
I think I could buy myself a few months to figure out what's going on and what I want to do next, whether it's buy another restaurant, look at the hotel industry, which I grew up in, what's next. And Boston said, hey, we got a few projects we could use a consulting on. So Boston's corporate said, we could use your help. So I said, yeah, no problem. I got nothing else going on. Let me take a month off and then I'll come to Dallas and we'll figure out what you need help with. So I started consulting for them. And from there, they're like, hey, we really like this. And I'm like, well, I don't want to leave Florida. That's fine. You can keep flying in, but we want to hire you full time.
Wow.
So again, no intention to get a job, but ended up working. I started off, I think, as a director of operations services, and
Hmm.
6 years later, fast forward a couple of steps up the ladder, and I'm still here. But through that process, again, like you had mentioned about learning, I had an opportunity to get my MBA here at SMU, and I took that opportunity, and I think that really gave me an additional foundation on leadership that was very different from what I've experienced to that point.
So talk about that for a second, because you had, I'll use the world's phrases on this. You had leadership experience from Hard Knocks, right? It was all experiential. Then you go to the academic side with your MBA. What was different and how did the academic aspect enhance the School of Hard Knocks?
I think sometimes when you come from the school of hard knocks, and everybody's different experience, so I can only speak for myself.
Sure.
I was stuck in some of the minutia details in my
Mm.
leadership style, and I wouldn't necessarily classify as micromanagement, but I would get into the weeds, is what we call in the restaurant industry. So I get into those details. I think the biggest thing I took away from the MBA is learning to be more visionary, be more on the strategy side. So, and I did concentrate on strategy, so that might be part of it.
Yep.
So to be more strategic in the thought processes and what we're doing versus more direct.
Mhm.
So I think that was one of the biggest things. And my cohort was very special in the sense of we had people that were running billion-dollar companies in my cohort, and you're asking,
Wow.
why are you doing your MBA at this point? Um, you
Yeah.
know, So we had leaders from AT&T, from running development for the fastest growing city in Dallas, or in the U.S.
Wow.
to in our cohort to So we had a unique group of people we were learning from, and I think I learned more from my cohort again than I did
Hmm.
from the instructions in a sense because those were real life lessons. Um,
Exactly.
so I think, and it was very well rounded MBA as well. So it strengthened my finance, my BBA in finance, the accounting side. The biggest piece I think I picked up also was the data analytics.
Mm.
What would take me for data prior to my MBA, I can now do in a third of the time just by learning the new tools, how to look at that data, how to clean the data, things like that. And being a very data driven leader
Yep.
is important to me. Data has always been important, but I've gotten more proficient in how I look at that data.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. One of the things I heard in that I want our listeners to catch, you talked about the networking with your MBA cohort, and many of us think about networking from the aspect of what can I get from it, right? Like I want to network because I want to develop sales, develop that base of people and that pipeline. Really, one of the greatest benefits of a network is just learning from other people and understanding who they are and their experiences. And it's not what we can get in sales in networking, it's what we can learn about life and leadership from those people.
No, 100%. I don't want to jump around, but I was tapped to be a Prosper Accelerator in our industry, in the restaurant industry. And I was just in Amelia Islands for the summit this past August.
Congrats, good place to
And
go.
yeah, it was horrible, let me tell you. So, but I remember sitting there at one of the events in the evening, and I'm sitting next to a VP at Cisco, and then the CEO of Chili's, who's in the news all the time. And it's just us four at the table. And it's like, where in my wildest imagination would I be sitting in front of two powerhouses and able to ask any question I could that could pop in my head, like
Yeah.
in programs like Prosper Accelerator. And I've been very fortunate in our industry to have mentors that have guided me. Is do I am I able to get in front of leaders that have accomplished so much for our industry as a whole, but also are thriving in their business.
Hmm.
And at this conference, I mean, they weren't the only CEOs. You had the Darden folks there. You had, Yum Brands represented there. You had the major players, but they're right in front of you. You can go ask them questions. And that's part of the Prosper Accelerator program, is to break down that barrier for the next generation to be able
Yeah.
to get access to the current leaders that are running these companies.
Yep. And you don't have to answer this because it's hard for you to say it, but I guarantee you those people got as much from you also. Listening to somebody who's been up there, gone up through. And that's the incredible thing about it is when people have a heart for leadership and a heart for people, we learn from everybody. They can be junior in experience, but it doesn't mean they're junior in knowledge or junior in wisdom. So that's awesome. So today, you're director of ops and culinary. Things are moving forward. So give us a sense of Boston's Pizza in the U.S. now. Obviously, you said it's based in Canada. Um, you've told me before that's 100% franchise, so it's not company stores at all. What are you guys looking at in expansion? Maybe our listeners are like, hey, that sounds kind of intriguing. Just talk about where the company is and where it's going with expansion.
Yeah, so we're a 61-year-old company. So we're founded by a Greek immigrant. He started off as Boston Pizza and Spaghetti House in Edmonton, Canada. The brand has evolved since. Our current owner, Jim, was actually the very first franchisee in Canada. He was a Mountie,
Nice.
son of a barber. He borrowed $5,000 from his dad, and
Wow.
I don't know his actual net worth, but I would venture to say it's in the billions.
Mhm.
But he has definitely grown the company and other ventures as well. So when he comes in the office, you would never know it. He would a very humble man, very down to earth. He's in his 70s and still going. So he has no intention of stopping. So we are the largest casual dining concept in Canada. So we are franchised there in the U.S. We're growing. We have opportunities throughout the U.S. We're definitely concentrating in the Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma market.
Mhm.
We're concentrating in that Michigan, Ohio market, and then on the West Coast in Arizona and California primarily. We are a franchise system, so we provide all the tools. So we provide the training to the franchise partner, the management team. We come help open the restaurant. We have a development construction person on our team that helps with the design, helps with the steps, because as a first time business owner or a restaurant person who wants to expand into a franchise group, we provide the expertise to get you going.
That's awesome. And I would assume that as VP of Ops, it's you and your team that spends a lot of time with those new franchisees.
That we do. So, and part of what we look for is somebody that does have restaurant experience,
Mhm.
but it's not necessary if you're a great business owner or a leader, because you're going to
Yep.
hire the right person. We're not expecting the franchise partner to be the general manager, but you need to know how to manage a general manager and lead
Absolutely.
them. So there's opportunities everywhere. Our cost is for the franchise fees $50,000. From
That's not
there,
bad.
yeah. From there, you do have to build out the space. So we don't want to peel back the layer now, but maybe on our next call, we'll be able to unveil what I'm dubbing as 2.0.
Yeah,
But as we know, the restaurant industry was hit hard coming out of COVID
it
and
was.
continues to. We hear of new restaurant chains filing bankruptcy every day.
Hmm.
We're a little different. We have zero debt, which is key. So we're
Incredible.
we're not beholden to anybody in the U.S. with Boston's or in Mexico. Our Mexico components is thriving. They have 3 more openings this year. They're crushing it down there as well. So what we're working on is to reduce the investment.
Hmm.
Our investments would range anywhere between 1.4 on the low end to could be as much as 3 million,
Yeah.
without not including land. So our goal in the project we're working on now is bringing that investment down to 6 figures on the low
Hmm.
end, and then trying to cap the high end to where you're getting an ROI of 3 to 5. I
Nice.
We're close to finishing that out, and once we can unveil that, I think our growth in the U.S. Will come with that, because if I told you you can invest money and you should, if you operate it correctly, that's the
Yep.
key. You can get your money back in 3 years. That's a solid investment.
That sure is. So give us a sense really quick just of the size and scope of Boston's, like how many stores in Canada, how many stores in the US, Mexico.
Yeah. So I'll start with the U.S. We have 20 units currently,
Hmm.
with 2 under active in construction and 3 or 4 in development right now. And then in Mexico, we have 23. We'll be at 26 by end of the year, with a few more under development for next year. Canada is roughly 383.
Wow.
So with a tenth of our population in the U.S.
Uh-huh.
So the opportunity here in the U.S. is still strong, to
Yeah.
grow the brand.
That's incredible. Great story, man. I love that you're still learning and growing as a leader. And I love this 2.0, right? We have to be strategic and keep moving forward and keep trying to get things better, and appreciate that so much. Well, Nimesh, we finish every show the same way. It's a quick leadership tip. And so, what is something our listeners can intentionally do today to be a better leader?
Keep your eyes open. I think, and there's more to that in the sense of keep your eyes and ears open. So keep learning, that we've touched on many times. Sometimes being the quiet person in the room, you're going to gain more than being the one talking the most.
Mm,
Um, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It doesn't matter if they're senior, junior, have no experience or not. They have their own thoughts, and you can learn something. Those
yeah.
golden nuggets are important. And you might not need it today in your tool belt, but I bet you in the next few years it's going to come up, and you're like, "Oh, I
Hmm.
know what I need to do now because I listened to this one person 2 years ago talk about a situation similar that I can adapt and take this into." So keep your eyes and ears open always.
Great tip. Great tip. Well, Nimesh, it's been great to have you on the show. Listeners, in the show notes, we'll have links to Nimesh and where you can connect with him personally. We'll also have some things on there for Boston's Pizza. But it's been great to have you here on the show. Congrats with the growth you've brought about in the organization and as it continues to go.
Awesome. Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. Be sure to see the show notes for links to Reenergize Professional Coaching and links to contact our guests. Now, hit that subscribe button so that you are alerted with every new episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast.